Alright, let's talk about three movies that I would have gotten to a lot sooner because I watched them, it feels like forever ago. When they first came out, which was like the weekend of the 12th, I think, is when I watched them. As soon as they were available, I watched them. And Clifford was like the Wednesday prior to that. Um, but it's taken me this long to do this because I mean, if you were given the task to talk about three movies that are as shit as these are, I don't think you'd be very motivated to do that either. So I would hope. And before I even go into this, because Red Notice is going to be first, I do just want to mention really quickly, not that anybody needs to defend their own opinion or try to justify their own opinion to whoever, but I genuinely do not want this to seem like I'm one of those people that just hates on everything, just simply for existing. I mean, there's many things that come out that are just dead on arrival anyway, and most people can identify them pretty quickly. But I mean, this was a particularly bleak weekend that these movies came out, and the fact that they came out all at the same time. Now, they get progressively less harmless as they go. Like, I'm not gonna, really hate on Clifford or anything, but I mean, when you talk about, just in general, the direction that movies are headed in, this can get kind of depressing. And sometimes it's people might think it's getting a little blown out of proportion. Like, I think Spielberg's been talking about this for quite some time. Everybody's like, oh, don't worry, the movie industry is fine. There's, no matter where you look, you're gonna find, small indie movies somewhere. There's gonna be some sort of quality out there somewhere. And that is very true. But also just as far as, movies that can be perceived as being entertaining actually being quite harmful in regards to what people are going to make in order to get the sort of instant feedback from the audience that's it's not one of those ways that's going to be discovered over time or anything like that. It's going to be like, we're going to give Netflix all the fucking views and then this movie will just go away forever. Unless they decide to franchise it, which should be easy because I'm pretty sure you could make Red Notice in a fucking week, and it feels like they did. So I'm sure, given that the sequel bait continues on, it's not like it would be hard for them to do that anyway. So the problem with that is that let's go ahead and go into. I guess we're technically already in Red Notice. Let's officially go into Red Notice specifically, and then we'll go to Home Alone, and then to Clifford. But as far as Red Notice goes, yeah, this whole thing where there's already been plenty of jokes made already, and a lot of people who were seeing it for what it was, they were saying it was like an algorithm made it. It's a comment I've seen a lot. There was some humorous comments I've seen about how it's the movie that's so generic. It's the movie that you see within a movie that other people are watching. It's the action movies they went to on Seinfeld, is what it is. And that's the thing, is we never really wanted to see those movies because they were just generic background shit that had nothing going on whatsoever. And while in that case it's for those characters in that thing, in that whatever show or movie or whatever to be watching, not so much us, the audience. Now it basically serves the same function, only it's for a real life audience, but this real life audience would much rather be looking at their phones because they can't help themselves, and that's who this movie is made for. I seriously feel like I read an article recently where, some executive or somebody in charge of something specifically said that. Explicitly said, their movies like Red Notice are made strictly to entertain people that can't stop looking at their phones. Because, obviously, they are streaming, and there's action beats, but literally nothing happening in between. It is a nothing story that you can follow without even fucking looking at the screen even once. And the fact that we're, catering to that now, because everybody's been saying for a while now that, attention spans are in a really bad place right now, and how bad that can be for movies that actually matter. So it's when they see movies that are as successful as Red Notice is, they're going to say, oh good, this is working, we'll keep doing this, because people will keep coming out and saying, oh, I was entertained enough. But then it's when you say that, it's now Netflix is saying, oh, okay, so this is just all we really need to do, and we could make so much. And that's not enough. You could say like, oh, that means they'll make enough to put into other smaller projects or something like that. You know, like whenever like an Irishman comes along or something like that, or a Marriage Story or whatever. But no, because this movie stars three people basically who are just on a soundstage surrounded by. This movie has probably as much green screen as I've ever seen in one movie since fucking Sky Captain. And the whole point of Sky Captain was it was all green screen. That was the selling point because it came out almost 20 fucking years ago. So here you have three people on these soundstages surrounded by green screen, and for some reason, I don't think anybody has figured out yet. This was $200 million spent. So, and you can look up like it's say, oh, because you had to pay the three actors, but it's still hard to tell exactly where a lot of that went. It's almost like something shady is going on behind the scenes or something. But yeah, so like Dune, like how much Dune was like what significantly less than that. And like I was saying in that video, Dune looks like they literally put the actors on another planet. And this is just all obvious green screen. Like even the opening scene alone, there's the whole like moment where they have a just really generic chase, and then Dwayne Johnson and Ryan Reynolds go over the side, and then they drop, and then they land on something, and it's like, oh my god, I almost thought they were gonna land on that green screen. Oh my god, they almost had me. And the whole thing is like that's at the beginning, so I was like, oh, that's a pretty bad green screen effect, and then I was just gonna kind of let it go. But then it's like it just gets progressively more and more obvious as it goes, and I think this is made even worse by the fact that this is a movie that's supposed to take place around the world. And I get the whole idea of, you know, like in the like COVID times and stuff like that. Obviously, you're gonna have to bring things down a little bit, but there's a number of things. There's a number of solutions to this. Number one, if you want to make this a really big budget adventure movie that's all around the world, maybe wait until you can do that a bit more, a bit more real and less artificial. Or you can somehow, some way spend $200 million for a whole bunch of CGI that is not in the least bit convincing, whether it be a background or a bowl or whatever it is, or a collapsing bridge, an explosion, whatever it is. This entire movie is basically, you can almost see, have you ever seen like the behind the scenes stuff for Sin City? And you can see all of the actors, and it's like all they're just completely surrounded by the green screen, and it's just them. You can basically see that in Red Notice without having to see it, if you know what I mean. Like it's so easy to picture. These are just three actors that never left one building, and not to mention it's three actors that are so. It is. So, I talked about the fan service in Ghostbusters last week, or this whatever, a couple of days ago, something. And it's, I don't know, these movies have completely taken my, the time frame of my mind away from me, and I don't know what fucking dimension I'm in anymore, but, the fan service where I was like, oh my god, it's so lazy, and oh my god, this is so easy. But it's just little moments here and there. This is an entire movie of that. Where it was like, the poster is the cheapest fucking looking thing you've ever seen that just has the three of them on it. They didn't need a plot. They didn't need effects. They just needed that poster, and this was gonna be fucking Netflix's most popular movie. It's so stupidly easy. I almost want to say it's offensively easy to do this. Like, the only effort that was put into this movie was getting their schedules to line up. That is the most work anybody on this movie had to do. Because the director is the guy that did, like, fucking Skyscraper with Dwayne Johnson, and I think another one with him. Central Intelligence, I think, is his. And he did We're the Millers. He's a random ass director. He did Dodgeball. So I don't really know what the task was here. He's credited as the writer-director, which usually means there's something, like, it's some sort of passion project or something. But we talked about this with Stephen Sommers when we talked about The Mummy Returns last month. And it's like, not necessarily. Like, even if you are the writer-director, you could still seem like a totally, hey, a studio hired me at random kind of thing. Or it's like, oh, we got Dwayne Johnson in this. Who's a director you've worked with a couple of times that we can just kind of say, hey, do this stuff, and he'll do that stuff. Dwayne probably said like, "Oh yeah, the guy did Skyscraper and fucking Central Intelligence. You know those movies that were clearly just these are movies that they could be their own trilogy. They are movies where their poster is the movie. And I know we've been seeing that for a while now specifically, but I mean, Dwayne Johnson really seems to be specializing in it. And I still like him a ton. Obviously, I'll praise Jungle Cruise for various reasons, but I mean, this particular area and people are the joke is so fucking in the ground now about oh you throw Journey 2 and Jungle Cruise and the fucking Jumanji movies and now this and it's like oh Dwayne Johnson's in the same place with the same clothes and all that, but I mean it goes deeper than that. It goes deeper than just Dwayne Johnson's kind of doing the same thing. Like it's because here's the thing is you can say that, but like I said, at least Dwayne Johnson is still entertaining when he does this thing. I know that's up for debate, I'm sure, but I'm still okay with him. However, when you have not one person that's the star of the movie, that's an actor that does the same thing in every single movie they've ever been in, you got three. It's not one, it's fucking three. And I know if you've seen anything that I've put out before on this channel, you already know my opinion of Ryan Reynolds. I am so sick of telling people my opinion of Ryan Reynolds. I'm as sick of I think I said this 3 fucking years ago when Deadpool 2 came out. That I'm just as sick of complaining about Ryan Reynolds as I am Ryan Reynolds' movies and his whole thing. His same thing he's been doing since Van Wilder, which, by the way, next year is 20 years old. It has been 20 years of Ryan Reynolds and his lovably sarcastic deliveries and his mere existence making him the golden boy of the internet, making every single fucking time he opens his mouth the most amazing thing that has ever happened to a very widespread audience. And I didn't get it in Van Wilder and I don't get it now. I barely got it for the first Deadpool. I was fucking done with him by the second one. And it's just, and fucking Free Guy, and just every goddamn thing he does. Even when and you can say, oh, he's got buried, or whatever the fuck. Like, the 1 or 2 defenses you have of, oh, he did something different once, or twice, even. But it's, I feel like I'm having deja vu to when I talked about Six Underground, because the only thing I remember about Six Underground is just complaining that it was Ryan Reynolds doing the Ryan Reynolds thing again. And that was a fucking Michael Bay movie. You can imagine the number of things there probably were to complain about in that movie, and I'm sure I did. Because I reviewed it normally, and I put it in my worst of that year list a couple of years ago. But that's the only thing I remember, is how much Ryan Reynolds drives me the fuck insane, doing his same bullshit. I am sure he's a totally nice guy. I'm sure he's really fun to be around. I'm sure hanging out with him in real life, this stuff is great and amazing. But I swear to God, I feel like I'm stuck in some Groundhog Day loop every time he puts something out. And he will not stop putting things out. Because even if it's not movies, it's, oh, he's doing something silly on Instagram or some bullshit, and it just never fucking goes away. He just did that bullshit with the switching interviews with Will Ferrell thing, which is kind of clever, but coming from them, it's like, it just felt like the same old shit. So it's, he can even his good jokes drive me insane now, because it's, it just still feels so repetitive. It's still just the same shit all the time. And to put him in a movie like this, it is like, it's, I almost felt personally attacked. I know that's, yeah, but I mean, I could almost seem, I don't know, but it's, I can't do this shit. And then, but that's where everybody knows that's Ryan Reynolds now, and they either love it or they hate it. So that's all it is. So I guess, we can now shift this focus to Gal Gadot, who is in this movie significantly less, but is the same thing where it's like, Wonder Woman came in. Like, she was in the Fast and Furious movies and nobody remembered. Whenever she was cast as Wonder Woman, I guarantee every fucking buddy had to Google her. And it's like, oh yeah, I remember her from, like, Fast 6 or something. And I don't even remember if she was in other ones. And I've seen those movies like 1 billion times. As shameful as that is, I have. And it's up to 7 anyway. But the thing here is that when Wonder Woman came out, it was really acclaimed. Everybody loved that character. It's like she played it perfectly. like the whole being out of place thing. It was so charming. And then after Wonder Woman came and went, and more movies with Gal Gadot started to come out, it suddenly became clear, oh yeah, she's practically talentless. What does she have? Look at, and I know, like when Justice League came out and stuff like that, people were really like saying like, oh wow, she like can't, like she, it worked that one time, and then let's not even go into fucking Wonder Woman sequel, because that was just an abomination of itself, and that's not just all on her, but she wasn't helping, and so so these are the three. These are the three they chose for this. So when you talk about something that required no effort whatsoever, and it's even funny to me that the director has a writing credit, because what the fuck is written in this? What is it? Is it a vague outline? Is it like a Curb Your Enthusiasm episode where it's like they outlined it and then just kind of improvised, but it's not an actual script? Because let me tell you, this is not any sort of Larry David quality. Not that they're comparable, but it's this whole thing of just letting it's those three and they all do their same thing, so just let them do their same thing because that's what audiences want. Like I was saying with Ryan Reynolds just opening his mouth. Like, it's almost like audiences are programmed at this point to where he doesn't even have to say anything. He can start to say something, and the audience will already be laughing for whatever it is. It could be anything. He could be getting ready to say, I just committed a baby genocide in my backyard. But when he opens his mouth to even say it, you probably won't even hear it. They'll already be laughing because Ryan Reynolds just opened his fucking mouth. And that's what the movie is. That's what the whole movie is banking on. Because you've got, like I said, it tries to have a plot here with, like, you know, it tries to be like a heist thing. But then it just turns into, when I think of, like, you know, bad, thoughtless heist movies that are just banking on one thing, which is playing their audience like a fiddle, I'm coming back to Now You See Me, which I feel like, when I talked about Now You See Me 2, I feel like I almost gave myself an aneurysm, so we won't talk about too much, but I will just say real quick, while we're on the subject, there is something in here that might stand out to people in some way, and that is a certain reveal that seems like it comes from out of nowhere and is some really big twist. But the thing about that is that I don't know that I've seen a twist that negates its own movie since Now You See Me, the first one. And it's like, and not like, this isn't like The Usual Suspects or anything like that. I mean in a very, very bad way. It's like, you look back at the whole movie and it's like, oh, well, not that this was ever going to make any sense, or not that it mattered, because not that this has a fucking story or plot anyway, and forget character development, but, yeah, so I honestly just, like, if it didn't feel pointless if somehow, some way, by some miracle, it didn't feel completely pointless by then, it will. It will in that time when there's like 10 minutes left. So it's got that whole thing. But yeah, if you want to talk about character development, I guess, you're never going to guess this. Ryan Reynolds has dad issues. He just wants the love of his father. That's all he ever wanted. That's why he's a criminal now. So we get scenes when, like, he's, you know, almost in tears talking about his dad looking off at the ceiling, and then The Rock gets the same kind of thing later, and then later we get, you know, a callback to that, and then Ryan Reynolds is like, I don't care about anyone. And it's like he's supposed to be that super rogue character that's so emotionally wounded that we've seen 100 billion times that means nothing to us anymore because we're just so... He's just nothing. It's just some, like, I'm not even sure that part was written. It was so fucking lazy and practically off the cuff. It might as well have been another improvisation where it was like, oh shit, I forgot we need character development. Hey, Reynolds, just say something about your dad or some shit. That's what gets people, right? That's what makes it look like the movie has some kind of emotion or something. And so that's all that. There's your character development. That's fucking great. And what's really funny about that also is you want to talk about the fact that this movie was $200 million. And this, I swear to Christ, I'm not even joking, brings back a criticism that I had about one of the Now You See Me movies. And that is the fact that this movie was $200 million. You could have probably gotten anybody or anything in this movie. So, we have a flashback to Ryan Reynolds' dad. The dad that he's been building up this whole time, the one that like started this whole egg thing, whatever the fuck the plot is. Plot in quotes. So, what do you think they did with this big giant budget that clearly had plenty left over after casting in these shitty ass effects and no location whatsoever? What do you think they did with the rest of the money? Do you think they put it into casting somebody to play Ryan Reynolds' dad? Are you ready to find out who plays Ryan Reynolds' dad if you don't know already? Get this. It's Ryan Reynolds in a vest! That must be where the rest of the budget went. And yeah, that whole thing where it was like, I think it was the second Now You See Me, where Woody Harrelson's character had a brother. And it was like, you know what, we'll just make it a twin brother. It's like, we don't want to spend any more money on any more actors. Just, it's Woody Harrelson again. So, that's... And it's like, I don't... That's the effort. That's the effort. And it keeps going. You could say, like for Jungle Cruise, for instance. You could say Jungle Cruise is like, you know... Like, people talk about Blunt's character being like a female Indiana Jones. And the fact that, you know, it's... The structure and the characters feel a lot like The Mummy. But it's like, I still love those characters. They still felt like their own sort of characters, especially Blunt's. But here... As far as it feeling like an Indiana Jones movie, this globe-trotting movie on a soundstage is... We actually have a moment where Reynolds is in the whole get-up, and he's in the hat, and he has a machete, and he, you know, cuts through the, you know, the tall grass or the weeds or whatever, and he comes out. And it's like, oh yeah, that looks like a shot at the beginning of Raiders or something. But that's not enough. Because this movie thinks its audience is a bunch of fuckheads, it decides that it's going to blatantly show this off by having him whistle the Indiana Jones theme like 5 minutes later. But I don't know if we should give the audience too much credit or not, because as soon as I heard him whistle that, at the very least, this is the most credit I can give the movie. At least Dwayne Johnson didn't have a moment where he called out and said, hey, that's the Indiana Jones theme, which they might as well have done. But the thing here is that I'm sure there's some idiots somewhere saying that that's some Easter egg or something, because Easter egg is the new buzzword for a very blatantly obvious reference that if you stopped looking at your phone for 5 seconds, you would notice. So, that's what it banks on. That's what it's doing as far as, like, references and then, you know, fucking one-liner humor. And that's Ryan Reynolds' one-liner humor at that. So you've seen the humor in movies for the last 20 years. So, all of that. And we do have a somewhat villain here. This is especially infuriating because this character is very built up and basically pointless. Basically a total waste of time. But they got Chris Diamantopoulos to play him. And Chris Diamantopoulos is a multi-talented actor. Like, like people see him and they'll go like, oh, he was in The Office for like a few episodes or something. This guy is a voice actor. He's from fucking Broadway. He can sing. He can dance. And he's a very good actor on top of all of that. And he's here to play this character that is so incredibly superfluous and just kind of disappears midway through. He has a moment where he might have died, but I don't know. I feel like they just kind of wrote him out. But it's... And he's supposed to be the big bad villain. This is like, it feels like halfway through the movie. He's just not even there anymore. It's like they just started forgetting things after a while. But like I said, this is that thing where they're not writing movies to write movies. They're not writing movies to tell stories. They're writing movies to jack up Netflix's view count and to get to those people that are only looking at their phones. So it didn't matter that Chris Diamantopoulos was here. It didn't matter what happened to that character because who gave a fuck? And there's so many better things he could have been doing. Yeah, so this is where time is spent. I hope he was paid a lot. I hope he got a little bit of that $200 million. Because he's the only one even with his completely pointless character, he's the only one here that's trying, by far. He's doing something. He's playing somebody that's not even close to the way he seems. So that's something. That's the biggest revelation in this movie that I can come up with. So that's pretty much all Red Notice is. That's all it is. And like I was, but people knew this going in. That's the problem. There was so much room for this movie to surpass expectations, and it doesn't even try. It's exactly what you think it is. It's exactly what you thought it was when you saw the fucking poster. It's exactly what you thought it was if you saw a headline that said Dwayne Johnson, Ryan Reynolds, and Gal Gadot in some heist movie for Netflix or some bullshit. There it is. That's all. And like I said, because everybody flocked to this fucking thing, because that's exactly what they knew was going to happen with this vague outline of anything, they could make a sequel to this in a fucking week if they wanted to. And then the cycle will come back around, and we'll potentially see less, these filmmakers that can't get stuff made that would come to Netflix. And I know Netflix has got endless money, so I'm sure there is a way for them to coexist. Like it could be hyperbolic to say this is like the death of things, but I mean, like I'm sure Netflix is bottomless enough that they can coexist. But it's like the fact that you could put $200 million into a movie like this just makes no sense. Do you realize how many movies could have been made on that? Like I said, the fact that Dune feels so far away from that, it looks like the way it does. There's something so fucking wrong with this. And like I said, seeing this is only going to prompt them to say, oh, we can continue to make movies where we put so much little effort into it because people will watch on their phones and will see just enough of it. They'll hear some action scene play out and then they'll look up. And then when it's over, they'll look back down. And then when the credits start to roll, they might notice like halfway through the credit roll, oh shit, it's over. They'll say, oh, I was okay with that. Like, there's nothing wrong with that. I was entertained for the 1/4 of the movie I looked at. But I don't, like I said, I don't want to be that guy that says, I know I'm long past that point, but I don't want to be that guy that says, oh, your opinion is invalid. Like, if you liked this, it's not for me to say if it's right or wrong, because that's not the way this works. There's no right or wrong way to like or love, or for that matter, hate or dislike a movie, but it's... I don't get it. I don't get how this movie can exist and be... Well, I mean, I can. But, I mean, just when you really think about it, it's hard to take in. So, that's... But here's the thing, though, is that we're about to go into Home Alone, and what I just want to say real quick is that might be controversial, is that I don't think Home Alone... Home Sweet Home Alone, I think is the title. I've already forgotten. I don't think the new Home Alone is as bad as Red Notice, because the new Home Alone is going to come and go. Like, it's going to come, nobody's going to be impressed with it, and it's going to drop off the face of it. It's going to hang out on Disney Plus for the rest of its life, and nobody's going to care about it. The people are going to care about it as much as they cared about all the direct-to-DVD sequels between Home Alone 3 and this one. No, like, I don't even know how many of those there even are, because I just don't care. They're off my radar. And that's going to be what the new Home Alone is. Red Notice, for the time being, is on everybody's radar. It was on everybody's radar just long enough for Netflix to say, oh, we can keep doing this. And that's a big reason why I think Red Notice is significantly more harmful than something like Home Alone. So, that sucks. So, that's pretty much Red Notice. So, there you go. So to talk about Home Sweet Home Alone, this, Home Alone, they kept calling it a Home Alone remake in all, like, the press leading up to it, but it's just another thing. I don't know if you could say, I don't know what you could say about it, because Buzz is in it. So it's like, it's in that sequel reboot territory that nobody knows about, but it doesn't matter. But the star of it is R.J. Yates, who everybody loved in Jojo Rabbit, me included, because he has that... Because he's like, one of the memorable, funny characters of that movie, and he really stands out in those small doses that we get him. And he has, like, he has, like, my favorite line in Jojo Rabbit, the stuff about, the screwing the dogs line towards the end. And, like, every time he's on screen in Jojo Rabbit, it's a winner of a scene. And so it's like, yeah, you watch Jojo Rabbit and you're like, yeah, that kid's gonna go places, that kid's gonna break out. And it's like, that could still happen, but when you reach that, it's inevitable you're going to get movies like this. And it's yeah. So, but what's interesting about this movie though is what exactly it's trying to do with itself, I guess, because there's so many miscalculations going on in this. I'm really not quite sure where to kind of start because the plot itself is so bizarre. Where the movie is basically from the perspective of the burglars, which is I didn't know that going in. So it was really I was like it took me a long time to figure out what direction this movie was going in because that was just so it didn't feel like it was going in the Home Alone direction, and then like you realize it's from their perspective more or less, but it doesn't make sense any like that's strange in itself. It could be interesting if it was done in a clever way, but it's so not done in a clever way to the point that that's not even the most baffling thing about this setup. The most baffling thing about this setup is why they become burglars and have to break into his house. Because they're under the impression that he has stolen an item of theirs. And so after he's locked in the house and his family's gone, their plan is to break into the house to get the thing that belongs to them back. You see where there's a lot of places here where this plot does not need to happen in the fashion that it does in any way whatsoever. And just to add insult to injury, it's the whole thing where we never see the item. We see a bulge in a coat pocket, and they assume that's what they're looking for. And we see that bulge in the coat pocket very early. Like, before the plot, like, when it occurs to him, I'm going to have to break into the house. And then, and before Ellie Kemper even comes into this, and it's the two of them trying to break in, it is established that we didn't actually see the thing. And as soon as you see that shot, where it's just a vague bulge in a coat pocket that he happens to see through the window, if you're not an idiot, you already realize that this movie's going to be for no reason. So, as if that wasn't the case already, yeah, so if you can't figure out what's going on here based on that one shot, you cannot be helped. I'm sorry. You are lost, probably forever. But as far as them trying to recapture the original movie or movies, I guess since I already brought it up, I guess the first thing we can talk about is the fact that Buzz is in it. Devin Ratray specifically is playing Buzz again. There was a rumor that Macaulay Culkin was going to be in it as Kevin as well. But you may not be surprised at all to learn that that is just not true. He's nowhere to be found in this. Kevin is mentioned quite a few times, and there is an interesting reference here where everybody has a McAllister security system, which is a good, clever reference and a good callback. So it has that. But at the same time, it still immediately looks like a cheap TV movie. It's somewhat trying to do the opening. I honestly have no idea. This is where I get mixed up in regards to whether how bad these things are as far as these remake / reboot / sequel things. It's when they don't do the thing, when they don't do the stuff from the original movie, but they do a vague representation of it, do you scold them for not just doing the thing, or do you applaud them for doing a little bit of their own thing, but they're still using it? This whole elaborate thought process just strictly comes from the opening has the house logo from the original movies, in a snowflake or some shit, but it's not like the original opening. So it's if it had been just the original opening, slightly modified, would we have been on its case for, oh, you're just doing what the original did? I don't know. It's when you're that's the thing though, is when you're in a no-win situation, when it's gonna be bad regardless, it's gonna be criticized regardless, maybe you should reconsider what you're doing, period. Maybe that's too much, I don't know, when there's money to be made. But we do have some faces here um, that help that they're here. Like Aisling B is in this as his mom, who is pretty much completely wasted. Um, and we do have Rob Delaney, I think his name is. I know I've seen him around. And Ellie Kemper as the married burglars. Um, Pete Holmes is in this with a couple of funny moments here and there. Some people like to hate on Pete Holmes, but I've always kind of liked him. And Timothy Simons, I think his name is, from Veep, is here as like the obnoxious relative and stuff like that. Faces here that are welcome faces and do the best that they can with their limited screen time. These very quick shots of his family. Because what's interesting about this is because there's so much focus on the burglars, now it's basically from their perspective, very little attention is given to the kid's family. Which is very odd, especially when we get our big reunion at the end, and it's supposed to be some big emotional thing. And it's like, if you think this even remotely scratches the surface of Catherine O'Hara coming back and that reunion, both of them, even when they meet at the tree in the second movie, is just as effective. But the scene that really always stood out to me was right before John Candy picks her up and Catherine O'Hara goes into like full drama. Like, it's her comedic nature's still in there, but it almost feels like she goes full drama when she gets dead serious and says, "If I have to sell the soul to the devil myself, I will get home." And you truly 150% believe her. Do not expect anything like that from this family because they're hardly the focus at all. So they're not even trying that. Like, all the emotional stuff is put into the burglars. Once again, you can see where just the miscalculations are everywhere. And like, it is an interesting way to touch on something that I've, like, a question I've always had, or just an interest I've always had, is the fact that there are shots in the first Home Alone where you can see, is most notably, it's it's right after the tarantula scene has happened, and Harry's just laying there unconscious, and you can see very clearly that Harry's wearing a wedding ring. And I always thought, what's the story there? It's like, is he in a bad spot? Does he have somebody to support? He could have just stolen it, but and then that thought kind of goes in your head, and you're like, well, that's interesting. That's an interesting detail that's just kind of there. But it's not something you put too much thought into. So it's almost like it's exploring that, seeing from the burger's perspective and making them sympathetic and almost the heroes of the movie in their own way. And it's like, that only further solidifies how much that didn't need to be explored. It's like, it's a fun thought to have, like, where does Harry come from? What's his life like? That's all I need. Like, I don't need an answer to that. I like the fact that I can ask that question, but that's all I need. That's all I need to know about Harry. We don't know shit about Marv, do we? And nor do we need to. That's why it's all the more funny that they're human punching bags. So that's another thing, is when they're made out to try to be sympathetic characters, and they're breaking into the house to get their own items, supposedly, back, the booby traps seem pretty excessive. And obviously, in any Home Alone movie, they seem excessive, but it's... Yeah, but that's the thing also, it's like, you get the sense that it's the fact that you've got such that interesting teaming of Pesci and Stern. Because it was the first Home Alone was the year Pesci won an Oscar for Goodfellas. And then Stern, came from his, from like Breaking Away and stuff like that, but most had really mastered that high comedic energy. And they were so great playing off each other, and their personalities were able to make the traps even more over the top than they already were. And it was great. And like, so here, when you're like retreading that territory, when it's just like, it's the only funny things are that they're getting hurt. You start to kind of see where the magic kind of happened that Joe Pesci and Daniel Stern were able to bring to getting the living shit beat out of them repeatedly, to the fact that they should have been long dead many traps ago. But so here it's like you just don't know. It's like everybody's just flailing around, but it's like, because of the weird setups, we're just in a weird place. It's like, you have much more questions than you do answers, and it's like, a Home Alone movie is not really a movie you're looking for answers in. So why do I have so many questions? It's weird. It's really weird. Um, and of course they're gonna, do stuff where like, some of the score carries over, much like we saw in Ghostbusters, where it's like, oh yeah, I recognize those beats before, and yes, of course, setting the trap is used during the scene where that the piece is named after. So that's pretty much all it really is. So I don't know. Like I said, it's really just a series of miscalculations. But like I was saying, not only do I think it's less harmful than Red Notice, but I just know this has probably already happened by this point since it took me so long. But I can just like when I was watching it and now I can just imagine this was basically a movie that was tailor made for people to like have YouTube videos where the thumbnail is the poster on one side and whoever's doing the video having an exasperated face on the other side, and they go scene by scene by scene and just go and say like, oh, this movie is the worst thing to ever happen in the history of the world, and it's like it actually isn't. And it's like they're gonna they want their views and they want to bring in that easy audience. It's basically like doing a review like that of this movie on YouTube is about as easy as Netflix making Red Notice. It's just like, you're already playing the audience like a fiddle, you're already giving them what they expect, and it's just like the more you say what they're expecting, the more they'll eat it up. It isn't that, like, it's not as bad as I thought it was going to be. But by that, of course, I mean it's not as intolerable as I thought it would be. Um, like there are a couple of laughs in it that kind of sneak their way in, and there's a clever reference here and there that actually surprisingly works. They're extremely few and far between and account for like maybe 20 seconds of the movie's runtime, but they're in there. Which makes it better than most probably think it will be. Um, and I think if anybody is taking it apart piece by piece and saying it's, the death of movies as we know it, um, they're not looking hard enough at Red Notice. And it's like, I think this coming out the same weekend as Red Notice did it a huge favor. Because like I said, it's going to come and it's going to go. People will take it apart in YouTube videos ad nauseum, but it'll be gone soon. So we won't hear about it. They won't try to make some sort of sequel or anything. If they do, it'll be as cheap and forgotten as those direct-to-video sequels that nobody saw. So that's really all that needs to be. So yeah, that's all that needs to be talked about. So let's go on to Clifford, which is just looking better and better to me as it goes. People seem to be taking to this in a way, like seeing it as this, harmless family movie. But it's like, I don't know if the weekend these movies came out just did me in or what. But I wasn't really feeling it. The director's Walt Becker, who here it comes again. He did Van Wilder, and he also did the fourth Chipmunks movie. So if you wanted to see a Clifford movie by the director of Van Wilder and a Chipmunks movie, here's your weird request. And I know people are giving it a lot of credit for saying, like, oh, Clifford doesn't talk in it. Like that's the thing. Like all three movies this weekend had a myth that needed busted. There was the rumor that Tom Cruise was going to have a cameo in Red Notice. That never happened. There was the rumor that Macaulay Culkin was in Home Alone. That didn't happen. And for some reason, it got on like David Alan Grier's IMDb page that he would be voicing Clifford. And he actually went on talk shows and said, no, I'm in the movie, but I am not Clifford because Clifford doesn't talk. So I don't know how that got started, but it honestly didn't surprise me when I thought Clifford was going to have a voice. But he doesn't. He's just Clifford. And people are giving it a lot of credit for that, but while it is nice that Clifford doesn't talk, at the same time, how fucking low is the bar? That it's like, you know what? I'm going to go easy on this movie because the dog doesn't talk. I feel like that's just like that's how low our bar is, which is pretty alarming. That almost a whole movie can be dismissed because of that, because it's not another shitty talking dog movie. It's still a very poorly animated dog movie. There's plenty of those to go around, and with a lot of characters that don't matter. Of course, he's going to befriend a little girl, and of course that little girl has to hide him for like a second, and then they have to hide once her uncle finds out, they have to hide him, but that doesn't last very long. And I do like that they played with that, like the whole idea of it takes place in New York and how like anything like that, anything outlandish in New York is normal, and the joke they have with that, where nobody even looks twice at him because it's New York. That's kind of a funny joke, but there's a lot here that right away, just the character introductions themselves, and for the fact that we actually normally that wouldn't matter in a movie about a big ass dog, but the fact that there's so much dedicated to the characters is why it feels like this really clunky beginning wasn't doing the rest of the movie any favors. So we get stuff like the little girl who I'm pretty sure is the girl from the Christmas Chronicles, has the nickname Food Stamps at school. So she comes home to her mom and she says, she's talking about that and she says, like, why do they call you Food Stamps? And for some reason, the answer to why do you have a nickname at school is to give her own mother her whole biography. So, dialogue like that is going to be really obvious, and it's like, oh, there's okay. So so basically the draw here is not necessarily characters. It's going to be that there's a big ass dog. All right, and I'm sure he's going to get into shit probably. He might even piss on something. Who knows? The questions are endless. The possibilities are endless. But like I was saying, she does have an uncle who is Jack Whitehall, and there's a joke here that might have sounded better on paper. So they're okay. So they're kind of British, but he's not British because he was born here. And there's a joke where he does a bad British accent a lot to irritate his sister, and obviously the joke within the joke is that Jack Whitehall's actually British and has a British accent. So I don't know. I don't know what any of this means. So it's a weird ass joke, but that and then there's characters like Horatio Sands is here, and he's got a Nicolas Cage and Moonstruck situation going on where he lost his hand at work. But for some reason, even though there's it's a kids movie and there's a child here and there's gonna be a big dog later, Horatio Sands explaining that he lost his hand is apparently hilarious. All the characters are like it's really bizarre. Like the little girl, everybody's just laughing as he tells the story of how he lost his hand. It's weird. And then of course we're introduced to John Cleese because you always need that and actor, the actor that's like, how did they even end up in this? I don't get it. And he's a nice kind of ode to the author of the books because he has the same last name. But he's only here for like a couple of scenes. There's a whole inexplicable thing in the middle where they play up like he's dead for no reason when it's just a case of mistaken identity. That's just here to eat up time. And there's a couple of scenes where he's shot in weird ways where it's almost like you almost think like the way they shot it was fucked up or something. Where he's like sitting on a bench and he's talking and the sun is shining into the lens. Like that's what's taking up the screen while John Cleese is kind of having a moment here, and the whole thing just felt like it was really thrown together, and it's almost like, well, yeah, because the attraction is this poorly animated big dog, it literally does not matter what the rest of the things are here. All these other places here are just places that eventually a dog will be walking through anyway, so half of it doesn't even really need to be visible. Because there'll be a big ass dog in the way eventually once we do the shoddy CGI to bring him to life. And it's just, and I don't think he ever once looks real. Like if there's one thing this movie could have done was even you'll notice even like bad movies have those things where it's like I wouldn't call this like a bad movie or anything, but like the one and only Ivan last year, where it was like the movie just doesn't matter, like who gives a shit about the movie. But the animation of the animals was crazy. How it looked like Cranston was there with a gorilla for real. And it's like, I'm curious if this movie would have had any sort of help or any sort of dignity if it seemed like they put any effort in Clifford's animation at all, when they clearly didn't. He never looks like he's really there, and it gets progressively worse as it goes because a lot of the climax is the little girl riding him around the city. And it looks dreadful. It looks like... You talk about, bad video game effects. Bad video game effects look amazing compared to this scene where she's riding him around the city. It's kind of ridiculous. But, like pretty much like Home Alone, it's really up to the random cast to try to bring any sort of life into this. David Allen Greer, as I said, is here as the super that they're hiding him from, and it's all these really ancient plots. And I could see this having. There's been a couple movies that kind of take me back to like the movies that were like this that I kind of grew up with, and I get the sense that this feels like it hits similar beats to those ones, but I never got that feeling. Like here's the thing: is it's like people shit on nostalgia for being a thing that's really easy to get people to like a movie if you just base it on that, and it's like when your nostalgia isn't even reaching, like it's like I can tell where it is. Not just the Clifford property in general, but just like the feel of the movie feels like some classic kids movie that would have come out in the '90s, and typically that wins me over relatively easily to where I'll be, at least somewhat won over by it. But I just felt nothing coming from this. I could feel like when people say that they're taken to it, it feels harmless and there's a little warmth in it. I can see where people would see that in this movie, but I wasn't getting any of it. Like I wasn't feeling it at all, and that bums me out. Like I'm not trying to hate the movie. It just felt really soulless to me, and I still feel like a lot of it comes down to the fact that Clifford's animation is where there's so many accomplishments in animation going on right now where we can make the craziest shit look like it's right there in real life. That this kind of stuff really stands out in a bad way. Even when he's not even when he's a puppy, he just looks completely like these actors are looking at nothing and playing off of nothing, to where he might as well not even be there. And it's yeah, but I think the thing that was really annoying me was that very quickly we reach total and complete creative bankruptcy, and it's like you have a movie like this and it's nice, it's a harmless kids movie, whatever. But then you've got the corporate villains. And I get it's kind of topical these days to have corporate villains, but I mean, it also feels like I think about remember that stupid Rob Riggle character in The Lorax? That's what I think of when I think corporate villains that don't need to be in kids movies, where it's like there's a story already there, and it's like the simplicity of Clifford. I think even was it Bill Burr or Louis C.K. or somebody had a whole bit on that, where there's literally nothing to the Clifford books. The whole point of I'm pretty sure it's a Louis C.K. bit, where the whole point of the books is Clifford's a big ass dog. That's the only thing. So, to throw this in here, where there's some science place, the whole E.T. thing, there's always some scientist coming after you, some corporation coming after you. If you're some abnormal being that's befriended a child. And then you have to have the, heartstring moments of, oh, is it going to get taken away? Oh, it's going to get experimented on. Oh, we have to break in and save it. It's all that. I gotta tell you, a Clifford movie is not fucking E.T. Not even close. And God bless him, the villain here is Tony Hale, Tony Hale always does what he can. I feel like he ends up in one too many parts like this, unfortunately, and he's very much above it. So, props to him for trying. Props to everybody in this for trying to give it a little something. I don't know that. I feel like Jack Whitehall maybe is a little too bland here, but it's because in the movies that I grew up with, it would have been the Jack Whitehall character that was like the main character, that was like the main star and was the recognizable face. And it's like if these kids that are seeing this like just saw Jungle Cruise, unless they just saw Jungle Cruise, I don't think they're gonna know who Jack Whitehall is, because I didn't really know who Jack Whitehall was prior to. I had seen clips of him on like those panel shows from time to time, but nothing like major to me. So yeah, so there's that. So like I said, there's even its nostalgia kind of fails. But I know that's more of a personal thing. So it's like I could see it totally working on other people. So that's why I don't feel near as bad about Clifford as I do the other two movies here. But I really wasn't into it. So that's unfortunate. And that's the thing is you could say the whole, well, of course given the target audience of Clifford, it's no surprise some adult would say they're not into it. But I mean, the fact that movies can so easily be universal. There's so many movies that have material like this that seems like it should be very one audience, one specific audience, that find ways to be universal. Um, and then there's other cases where it just really doesn't. But like I said, I don't begrudge anybody that took to this. So if anything, it's almost kind of nice that people actually kind of like it. It seems from what I've heard anyway. But I'm yeah. So I mean, between these three and Ghostbusters, I'm really trying not to be the dude that's just hating on everything right now. But it's yeah. Sometimes we just have weekends like this where that happens. So I think I can go ahead and leave these at this. And like I was saying, in that Ghostbusters video, we got a lot of these new releases, a lot of the Oscar movies. So there's going to be like 3 or 4 more new release videos, like Eternals. I still haven't talked about yet. And then going up to House of Gucci, which is obviously tomorrow. So yeah, and then we'll get into some of the stuff that I missed in October, and then we'll get back to it, and we'll be talking about our awards predictions in the next however many days, sometime like next week, and we'll talk more about those awards movies that I'm going to be talking about in full, and then we'll see where we end up with all that. So until whatever the next thing is, I think that's it.